Magandang araw mga kapwa naka-quarantine. Mahigit 2 linggo na ang lumilipas, hindi pa rin alam kung ano ang tunay na nangyari sa yumaong flight attendant na si Cristine Dacera. May mga akusasyon at pahayag na nga na binawi. Nauna pang isinagawa ang pag-embalsamo kaysa sa pag-otopsiya. Ang mga otoridad, magkakasulungat pa ang mga sinasabi. Malalaman pa ba natin ang katotohanan? O mananatili ba itong isang misteryo? Katulad ng marami pang nakaraang krimen. Inilibing na ang mga labi ng flight attendant na si Cristine Dacera noong ika-10 ng Enero sa General Santos City. Sa kabila nito, nananatili pa rin balot ng kontrobersya ang kanyang pagpanaw. Ika-1 ng Enero nang ideklarang dead on arrival si Dacera sa Makati Medical Center. Si Dacera ay natagpo ang walang malay ng kanyang mga kaibigan pagkatapos ng kanilang New Year's Eve party sa room 2209 ng isang hotel sa Makati. Noong araw ding yun, ang tatlong nakasama sa party at nagdala kay Dacera sa pagamutan ay idinitain ng Makati Police. Agad ding idineklara sa publiko na isang rape-homicide case ang nangyari kay Dacera. Ika-6 ng Enero, sa release order ng isang Makati City Prosecutor, pinakawalan ang tatlo. Wala umanong sapat na ebidensyang ginahasa at pinatay si Dacera. Sa kabila nito, patuloy ang pag-usig ng publiko sa 10 mga lalaking nakasama ni Dacera sa naturang party noong bagong taon. Ang hatol ng masa, guilty ang mga lalaki sa panggagahasa kay Dacera. Matindi naman itong itinanggi ng mga akusado.
Walang may kayang gumawa ng pagbababoy kay Tin. Hindi namin kayang gawin sa kanya yun at hindi kami ganong klaseng tao.
Sa pag-usad ng investigasyon at paglabas ng mga bagong impormasyon, nagbago rin ang opinyon ng publiko. Marami nang nagduda sa di umunoy mga irregularidad at pagkukulang ng pulis sa investigasyon. Isa na rito ang di umunoy pagkakaembalsamo sa katawan ni Dacera bago pa ito maotopsiya.
Kasi yung hotel is a quarantine facility. So, it is presumed na pag nandun ka, baka nagka-quarantine ka. Ang policy pala dyan is mauna yung embalming bago yung autopsy.
Makaraan ng 2 linggo mula ng pagkamatay ni Dacera, binawi ng ilang akusado ang kanilang mga unang testimonya. Ayon sa kanila, tinakot at ginipit lang sila ng mga pulis upang gumawa ng kwento at magturo ng ibang ididiin sa kaso. Ika-13 ng Enero sa bisa ng Sabpina, humarap na sa NBI ang 12 guests sa room 2207 at katabing kwarto ng inupahan ng grupo ni Dacera. Makaraan ng 2 araw, lumitaw na rin ang ika-13 sa mga naturang guest sa mga testimonya at CCTV video na lumabas. Nagpalipat-lipat ang grupo ni Dacera sa 2 magkatabing kwarto sa hotel. Habang ang nakadeklara sa otopsiya na sanhi ng pagkamatay ni Dacera ay ruptured aortic aneurysm, naniniwala pa rin ang pulis na si Dacera ay hinalay at pinatay. Mga kapwa naka-quarantine, mga kasama natin ngayon upang pag-usapan ang sensational case ni Cristine Dacera, si Attorney Rowena Daroy Morales, isang UP Law Professor na nagtuturo ng Rules of Evidence. Magandang araw sa inyo, Professor Morales.
Magandang araw, Howie. Magandang araw.
Prof, now, speaking of evidence, this case has a body, has CCTV video, and possibly over a dozen witnesses or at least companions ng victim on the night or the day that she died. Bakit kaya hanggang ngayon misteryo pa rin kung anong talagang nangyari? Kahit yung basic na tanong na did she die of natural causes or not ay hindi pa masagot.
Una, hindi ko pa sigurado kung bakit natin tinatawag siyang victim. Are we talking about victim of a crime or victim of some accident or some incident? We just know that there was a body that was found. So I'm not so sure whether victim is the right term to be used to describe her.
Pero ideally, ano dapat yung naging procedure if a dead body is found? in a bathtub in this particular case, no? Ano ba dapat yung nangyari?
Kahit na saan natin makita ang isang patay, dapat nating i-report sa pulis. Sa pulis po. Whether it's an accident or an incident or we just happen to be passing by, which we do not know whether it was an accident or an incident, the first thing we do is to notify the police. The police, remember, is tasked with investigating and trying to find out the facts regarding what happened. It is not supposed to be solving a case, which is done by the courts. It is not supposed to be determining guilt, which is, of course, the function of the courts. So, nag-ano lang yun, iimbestiga. And the first persons that they will see, whether it's the person who reports the incident or the discovery of a body, will perhaps be called not even a suspect, a person of interest.
Okay, so a person of interest, hindi siya or hindi pa suspect, no? Ano yung kaibahan ng person of interest sa isang saksi or witness?
Anyone who was present will be a person of interest. In other words, pwedeng possible witness, pwedeng possible respondent during a preliminary investigation. So a person of interest may be at some point be a suspect. That suspect at some point could be the accused. So a person of interest may after all be just a witness and not necessarily involved. However, every witness will be considered a person of interest.
Ang initial
Interested in you and what you know.
So ang initial procedure na gagawin ng police ay fact gathering, no? We're not even calling it evidence at this point. It's just gathering the facts, binubuo yung kwento. At what point ba pwedeng sabihin na nagkaroon ng foul play o yun nga, maaring victim yung namatay?
If the police thinks that it's out of the ordinary, in other words, it doesn't look like nadapa siya at nabagok or nalunod at walang ibang pagkakataon na hindi nalunod, then they will conduct an investigation. And every person, any person within the vicinity will be a person of interest and may likewise be a witness. So every witness will be considered a person of interest because he knows something. And so, wala pang accused yun. If an incident is suspected to be out of the ordinary, let's say it may constitute a crime, and the police were there would what you will call an inquest, an investigation immediately after the crime or during the crime. If, however, some period has passed or has lapsed, then it will be a preliminary investigation. And the preliminary investigation is where witnesses come in, where affidavits come in and counter affidavits, and sometimes what we call evidence.
Well, yung isang malaking source of confusion dito kasi parang iba-iba yung naging pahayag din ng police, no? Yung medical legal officer, yung isa sa mga una nagsalita, sinabi niya ay yung cause of death or probable cause of death ay yung ruptured aortic aneurysm, no? And then that was disputed later on by police officers who had higher rank than him, saying na rape nga yung nangyari or it's a rape killing dahil nga may evidence daw or may marks yung katawan. Ano ba dapat yung naging procedure dito? Pwede ba magsalita ka agad? Halimbawa, yung isang medical legal officer o dapat yung isang peto lang yon ng yung facts na gather bago magpahayag nga yung police.
Ang medical legal officer may be part of the PNP or part of the NBI or part of any investigating body, no? What we're trying to say here is that a medical legal officer is someone who has medical knowledge in forensic medicine. Okay? Now, maybe a police officer, because there is always a medical legal officer within the police ranks. I am not so sure about what happened now, why there seems to be some discrepancy between what the medical legal officer first said and what the police officers or the officials, for that matter, said. Maraming implications yan, which we can only surmise.
Yeah, and another aspect that confused things was parang mabilis daw masyadong inimbomb yung bangkay, no? Before a thorough autopsy or a real autopsy. Kailan ba ginagawa ang autopsy? Sino nagde-decide na kailangan ma-autopsy ang isang katawan?
Pag nakita ng mga pulis na mayroong isang insidente o isang tao na siguro ay biktima ng tinatawag ninyong foul play or out of the ordinary death, gusto nilang malaman kung ano nangyari. And they may order an autopsy. Now, an embalmment is a totally different procedure which may or may not have anything to do with the autopsy. An autopsy, we know, may be difficult to do, if not impossible, if a body is embalmed. Because we know that when a body is embalmed, all the fluids are extracted and removed and replaced with some other material para hindi nga mag-decay yung katawan. Now, in case there is a suspicion of foul play, an autopsy is immediately ordered if it is discovered by the police.
Anong usually considered the strongest evidence in cases like this? Is it the body? Is it a witness? Ano ba, Prof?
Tama yung term mo kanina, body of evidence. There is no one kind of evidence that will show whether or not something really happened or did not happen, or whether by testimonial evidence or what you call, there's direct or indirect evidence, there's testimonial evidence, there's object evidence, but whether or not one is more important than the other is a matter of appreciation. For instance, if something is capable of being determined by sight, then an eyewitness would be the best. If, however, there is no eyewitness, other possible witnesses, tatawag na lang nating witness na may narinig o may naramdaman o may nahawakan, and it would all point to some conclusion, not necessarily definite conclusion, but towards some determinable fact, no, that will show something. Iba pa rin yun. So it's all a matter of appreciation. Evidence at the end of the day is a matter of appreciation.
Halimbawa, paulit-ulit ini-ere yung iba't ibang video clips, no, na galing sa CCTV video which shows Cristine Dacera in the company of various men, no? What do you think that kind of video can show? Can that be evidence?
It may be evidence. It's evidence that she was there. It's evidence that she was there at that time. It's evidence that she was there with certain people. But it is not evidence that something really happened outside what was seen in the CCTV camera.
Yeah, one video kasi that was released, I suppose it was from the police. It showed Cristine Dacera kissing one of her male friends or companions outside one of the rooms, no? So it made it seem like they were having some kind of engaged in some kind of intimate act, no? But nakita in a Facebook post yung buong video na it showed the same person pushing away Cristine, no? And then there was a claim by that man and some of his companions na it's impossible that they would have been attracted to Cristine or raped her because they were all gay, no? How strong is that testimonial? I mean, how does one prove na totoo na gay yung isang tao, no? And is that enough reason to say na hindi sila capable of rape?
Amazing. Now we're trying to say that rape can be committed only by a 100% male. We know that once a person is born, sex is determined at birth as male and female. All the nuances of being a female or all the nuances of being a male is just identity. In fact, I think we are also aware, all of us are so aware, that a person may identify himself as a male, and then later on as a homosexual, and then later on as a bisexual, and then later as a male, blah, blah, blah. But it does not mean that he cannot have, let's say, sex with another person, whether of the same sex or the other sex. No.
Okay, Prof, I want to go back to itong sinasabing persons of interest, no? Kasi two of the the persons of interest. I don't know if they were already considered suspects at that point. They wrote out an affidavit, no, and where they said that there were drugs present in one of the rooms where the group partied, no, and then later on they retracted, saying they were pressured by police to making that statement, no? And then sabi ng mga abogado ay hindi raw valid yung statement na yon dahil number one, they were pressured by the police. Number two, they were not read their Miranda rights. Wala raw lawyer present. Pwede ba talagang gamitin yon to invalidate a statement na hindi binasahan or hindi ni-remind yung persons of interest o kung sino man yung nagbigay ng statement ng kanilang Miranda rights. And that's basically the right to remain silent, right? And the right to counsel.
Totoo po. Whatever statement made in violation of the Miranda rights can be considered as trash, because evidently a statement made in the presence of, I'm sorry, scary policemen. If I find the policeman in front of me at any time of the day and asking me questions, I will be scared, even if I were a lawyer. So whatever statement is made without counsel, on the other hand, may have this kind of an effect, and it may be held against this person who made the statement. That is the reason why the Miranda rights will, in your words, invalidate whatever statement, because it is in violation of a very basic right of a person, which is to make a statement with full volition of what he's saying. In other words, alam niya talaga, and no force at all is present.
Prof, no? Kasi minsan, may mga reporter, TV reporter, radio reporter, tatanungin yung suspect or person of interest, ano ba nangyari? And that person being interviewed, parang may sasabihin na parang confession, ano? Na parang aaminin kung ano yung ginawa nila. Is that valid evidence? Can that be submitted to court? Can that be used to convict that person?
It may be used as evidence, but it need not necessarily be the evidence that will convict. But may I say something about television reporters and television interviews? Everybody wants to have his Andy Warhol moment. So everybody wants to have this little moment in time na, wow, nakita ako sa TV, narinig ako sa radyo. So they will want to say something and anything. Marami yan, not only in this case, but in many other cases where a person will volunteer information that may even be damning against him.
Yeah, minsan selfie pa nga. Minsan selfie yung admission, di ba? I-video mo yung sarili mo, ipopost mo sa Facebook mo. And that can be used as evidence. I mean, I'm also following the issue in Washington, D.C., yung nagrayot sa Kapitolyo doon. A lot of people were filming themselves, no? And ngayon, yun ang ginagamit ng FBI to identify them, arrest them, and so that can be used as evidence, no? Yung interview sa kanila, that can be used as evidence.
Correct. That is the phenomenon of technology, di ba? The phenomenon of new technology, so that all of these innovations we take for granted without realizing the effects. I think our public needs to be educated on this.
Well, speaking of which, you're an educator, Prof, no? What would you advise on nabanggit nyo na yung broadcast journalist na nag-i-interview ng mga suspect, persons of interest, witnesses? Should journalists be reminding people they will interview that they have a right to be silent, they have a right not to incriminate themselves, or obligasyon lang yun ng police?
Journalists have this obligation. Anybody who makes a statement and who will ask for a statement, and with the thought that such statement may be used against him or them, should always be aware of the rights. We have this, ano lang siya obligasyon lang siya, moral obligation or right. I think we're all aware of our KBP standards, but they're not even mandatory. They're all hortatory, or they exhort lang. You are all reminded, etc., etc. Because it is very difficult, Howie, to hold a person morally responsible for the things that they do, because morals differ from person to person and from culture to culture. So journalists have this huge obligation. And I salute you, by the way, for what you have been doing, as a
Thank
journalist.
Salamat po. But what would you advise naman people? I know that you also advise clients and you directed the Office of Legal Aid sa UP College of Law, no? And you've had clients who could not afford a lawyer, no? So nagbibigay din kayo ng advice. Uh, anong advice na ang pwede niyong ibahagi ngayon sa mga tao na maaring magkaroon nga ng kaso at interviewing din ng police o interviewing din ng media, they have a right not to say anything. Tama?
Yes, yes, of course, of course. The right not to say anything unless a lawyer is present and unless that lawyer has reminded this person making the statement of his rights. But otherwise, yes, he has a right to keep quiet, even in the presence of a lawyer. He cannot be forced to make a statement. So if a person makes a statement, that there may be some force.
So back to the case of Cristine Dacera, Prof, no? So just to wind this up, ano bang kailangan malaman before we can actually say, we can already say that the case has been solved, the case is closed? Because if you recall, I mean, it was prematurely pronounced closed, no? And then binawi ng police. They pronounced it closed and then they said, hindi pa pala closed, and then still open, and magkakaroon pa ng hearing yung police, etc. And the NBI is still conducting its own probe. Pero kailan ba natin masasabi na sapat na yung evidence?
A case is closed from the police's point of view when its investigation has been completed and they have determined who a suspect could be that would eventually become an accused. For them, it is case closed. The word case closed can also mean, of course, that the case is final and executory, meaning after hearings have been made all the way up to the Supreme Court if necessary, which is another meaning of case closed, which is not what is meant in this case of Dacera. So when the police said case closed, it meant that their investigation has been completed, only insofar as they're concerned.
And then of course, binawi rin nila, no? And then they opened it again because may mga detalye pala na hindi masyadong natalakay or naimbestiga. So I think up to now, it's still considered an open case.
That's right. Meaning it's still under investigation. That is what is meant by a statement, case closed, that is retracted. It is still under investigation. A case closed by the police means the investigation has been terminated, but apparently it's not terminated.
Of course, there's so much publicity about this, no? And then everyone who has anything to do with the case has been very active on social media, in mainstream media, commenting on this case. I know there's a principle in law called sub judice, no? It doesn't apply in this case yet kasi wala pang court case. Tama? I mean, obviously, all of these people are trying to influence public opinion, trying to influence where this case is going, no? So is anyone violating anything by so much commenting in public on social media?
The principle of sub judice is an ethical rule. The principle of sub judice means that any of the parties in a case should not be talking about the case lest it would turn into a public trial, and that the determining authorities, in other words, a judge or anyone who has to decide anything, may be influenced by outside the forces. Sub judice does not apply in this case. And the sub judice, by the way, as I said, is merely ethical. It's not a principle that will negate whatever evidence has been presented. It has something to do with our sense of value. It's a moral issue.
And then, Prof, no, very early on, lumabas na yung mga pangalan ng companions ni Cristine Dacera, even if they were not suspects. At that point, I don't even know if they were persons of interest. Lumabas na sila, yung mga pangalan nila, etc. No? Was there a violation there of their privacy?
If there was an investigation, it was necessary to know who were there at the gathering. Whether or not the name should be issued out and announced in public is again a matter of of ethics, no? Now, whether there is an invasion of privacy is another thing. If the reason why their names were divulged to look into their personal lives, that is where privacy is involved. But there is no privacy issue where the intent was to determine whether they're going to be persons of interest or suspects, or to determine the persons involved or who may be involved in a particular case.
And then finally, the person who passed away, again, you reminded us not to call her a victim, no? Si Cristine Dacera, her reputation has also been discussed, no? Should that have any bearing? Yung lifestyle niya, yung kanyang reputation, etc. Her social life, etc. Ang dami rin lumabas tungkol doon.
It has no bearing at all sa case, not at all. But I think what she is, what her lifestyle is, what her preferences are a matter of perhaps interest to media, but not to the case. No, not sa case at all.
Yeah.
Alam mo naman sa media, we like to look at all angles. And part of that angle is the personal life. Again, it's a matter of ethics.
Yeah, and the more interesting the details, the better.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
but I'm going to be a little nasty. Sometimes the more negative, the more attractive to media, right? We don't discuss victories. We like to discuss losses.
And then may kasabihan din, no? If it bleeds, it leads, no?
Indeed.
Prof, thank you for sharing your knowledge and putting everything in perspective. Maraming salamat, Professor Rowena Daroy Morales, Professor. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you for your
Harry. My
time.
pleasure.
Ang hustisya ay hindi lamang karapatan ng kampo ng biktima, kundi pati ng mga akusadong walang kasalanan. Makamit sana ito upang maprotektahan ang lahat ng sangkot. Maparusahan kung meron mang may kasalanan. At maibalik ang kredibilidad ng pulisya. Maraming salamat sa panonood at pakikinig. Ako po, si Howie Severino.